You ever notice how easy it is for someone to paint a perfect picture of themselves with nothing but a few polished sentences? And yet something in you says, "Hold on, let me see what you actually do." Words are free. Behavior costs. Carl Jung talked about this long before any of us did. He said people show you their patterns before they ever admit them. So today, let's break down why you should never trust what someone says until you've watched how they move. Carl Jung believed every person develops a persona, a kind of psychological suit they wear to function in the world. It's the version of themselves they think is acceptable, impressive, or safe to show. And that persona usually speaks first. It talks with confidence. It presents a curated identity. It tries to convince you that this polished layer is the whole truth. But the persona isn't built for honesty. It's built for survival, reputation, and control. It tells the story someone wants you to believe, not the one that's actually running the show. So when someone uses big statements, bold claims, or carefully chosen words, you're usually hearing the mask talk. Jung's point was simple. The deeper self slips out only when the mask gets tired. You see it in unfiltered reactions, not rehearsed speeches. You see it in what someone does when nobody's watching, not what they say when someone is. The real self isn't announced. It's revealed through behavior that isn't trying to impress anyone. And once you understand this, you stop getting distracted by the performance. You stop taking every confident declaration at face value. You start looking past the presentation and studying the person behind it. Because no matter how polished someone's words are, the persona can never hide forever. Words can be molded to fit any situation. Someone can say one thing today, another tomorrow, and sound just as convincing both times. But patterns don't lie. Patterns reveal what a person really prioritizes, values, and responds to, whether they want to or not. Think about someone who constantly talks about being disciplined. They tell everyone they wake up early, hit every goal, and stick to routines. But then you notice that week after week, deadlines slip, commitments are missed, and their routine changes depending on convenience. The story they tell doesn't match the pattern of their behavior. That's where the truth lives. Or take someone who always claims they're reliable. They say they're the kind of person you can count on, yet every time an unexpected problem arises, they disappear, avoid responsibility, or shift blame. Their words promise one thing, but their repeated actions show another. That repetition isn't accidental. It's a signal. Jung pointed out that the unconscious speaks through patterns, not speeches, and these patterns aren't rehearsed. They appear in moments of pressure, boredom, or discomfort, when the persona relaxes and the deeper self takes over. You can see it in small, consistent behaviors. How someone reacts when plans change, how they handle frustration, how they respond when no one is watching. Here's the kicker. Even when someone believes they're acting consistently with their words, the pattern may reveal unconscious contradictions. That's why paying attention to repetition beats trusting a well-crafted story every time. Words can impress. Patterns expose. Once you start noticing these repeated behaviors, you begin to see the truth behind the mask. You see who's reliable in practice, not just in promise. You see who adapts and grows, and who consistently defaults to avoidance or self-interest. Patterns are evidence. Words are persuasion, and evidence always wins. Most people talk from their self-image, the person they believe they are, or the person they want to be seen as. But behavior comes from a completely different place. It comes from habits, impulses, fears, strengths, blind spots, and unconscious motives that don't ask for permission before showing up. And that's where the gap appears. Someone might describe themselves as disciplined, but their daily actions show constant avoidance. They might call themselves calm, but the moment something doesn't go their way, their reactions say otherwise. They might insist they're responsible, but their follow-through quietly contradicts every word. Jung explained that people often misunderstand themselves because their conscious story is only a small slice of their psychological reality. We tend to build narratives that feel good, look consistent, and keep us comfortable. But the unconscious doesn't care about comfort or consistency. It acts. It reveals. It exposes the truth whether or not someone is aware of it. That's why you can't rely on self-description. People aren't lying most of the time. They're describing a version of themselves filtered through idealism and hope. But the real version shows up in their choices, in their reactions, in the things they repeat without thinking. And once you notice that gap between how someone talks and how they operate, you'll understand something crucial. The self-image may sound convincing, but reality always wins. Behavior always reveals what words try to decorate. If you want to understand someone accurately, shift your attention from what they claim to how they operate when there's no spotlight on them. Most people can talk themselves into a flawless version of who they think they are, but behavior doesn't rehearse. Behavior tells the truth by accident. Watch someone under pressure. Pressure strips away performance. It forces reactions that come straight from the deeper self, not the polished persona. Watch how they behave when they lose control of the outcome. When they can't predict what will happen next, their real patterns surface. You'll see whether they stay grounded or spiral, whether they adapt or collapse, whether they take responsibility or deflect it. Watch what they do when things become inconvenient. That's when their priorities become obvious. That's when you see what actually matters to them, not what they say matters. And watch how they act when there's nothing to gain. When there's no benefit, no praise, no advantage, you're seeing a person's baseline, who they are without incentive. Once you start observing instead of believing, everything shifts. You won't get fooled by confident claims. You won't get swept away by polished language. You'll see the difference between someone who talks like they're consistent and someone who actually is. Observation doesn't just reveal people. It protects you. It sharpens your judgment. It makes you immune to the kind of words that were never meant to be trusted in the first place. Most people don't set out to misrepresent themselves. They simply don't realize that the way they talk about who they are is heavily influenced by who they want to be. And that idealized version often has very little overlap with their real patterns. People create personal narratives that make sense to them. Narratives that maintain confidence. Narratives that smooth over contradictions. Narratives that help them feel stable and coherent, even if those stories don't match their behavior. Jung explained that the mind does this automatically. It protects itself by building a clean explanation of who we think we are, while the unconscious quietly makes decisions in the background. That's why someone can wholeheartedly believe their own words while acting in ways that oppose them. It's not intentional deception, it's psychological misunderstanding. When people talk about themselves, they're describing a filtered identity. An identity shaped by hope, memory, bias, and the desire to appear consistent. That's why someone can say they're patient while their real reactions tell a different story, or insist they're dependable while their habits reveal inconsistency. Words are influenced by aspiration. Actions are influenced by reality. If you trust words alone, you get caught up in someone's idealized self-portrait. But if you watch their behavior, you see the unfiltered version, who they are without the editing. And once you recognize this gap, you stop taking every self-description as truth. You start paying attention to what the person might not even realize they're revealing. Here's the rule that changes everything. Never accept a self-description until you've seen someone's behavior in at least 3 different contexts. Not 1, not 2. 3. Because 1 moment can be an exception, 2 moments can be coincidence, but 3 moments reveal a pattern. Context exposes the unconscious. When someone is in a familiar situation, they can maintain the persona. But when the environment shifts, when the pressure changes, when the dynamic is different, the mask doesn't always adjust fast enough. That's when the real self shows. Watch how they act when things are easy. Watch how they respond when things are uncertain. Watch how they behave when things don't go their way. When you line these moments up, the pattern becomes undeniable. Jung emphasized that the unconscious reveals itself through what people repeat. It doesn't care about someone's polished description of themselves. It doesn't rewrite its tendencies just because someone wants to sound impressive. It shows up exactly the same way under different conditions. That's why relying on observation is so powerful. You're not judging people by their image, their confidence, or their storytelling. You're judging them by the evidence. And once you anchor yourself in that rule, your awareness becomes sharper, calmer, and far less influenced by words that were never meant to hold the truth. When you start trusting observation over words, you unlock a level of clarity that most people never reach. You stop getting swept away by confident claims, impressive speeches, or polished self-descriptions. You begin to see people for who they actually are, not who they want you to believe they are. And once you grasp this, you start navigating interactions, decisions, and opportunities with a completely different lens. Think about it. Someone can talk endlessly about their reliability, their discipline, or their values. But the moment pressure hits, the mask slips. Deadlines are missed, excuses pile up, commitments fall through. If you only listen to words, you're blindsided. You assume intention equals action. Observation teaches you to see patterns, repetition, and behavior that reveal what a person truly prioritizes long before words can convince you otherwise. This skill shields you from disappointment and frustration. You stop assuming people will live up to their own promises just because they sound confident or persuasive. You stop giving credit to appearances. Instead, you learn to assess people based on what they actually do consistently, under a variety of conditions. You learn to separate the persona, the performance, the polished story, from the person, the one whose habits, reactions, and choices define them. It also sharpens your judgment. When you observe someone's behavior in different contexts, under pressure, in discomfort, or when outcomes are unpredictable, you start seeing patterns that the person themselves might not even notice. These patterns are a window into unconscious tendencies, priorities, and values. They reveal reliability, adaptability, integrity, and resilience in ways words never can. You start noticing subtleties others miss, repeated habits, unconscious reactions, and contradictions between what is said and what is done. The protection you gain isn't just about spotting deception. It's about being grounded in reality. You stop reacting to charm, persuasion, or eloquence. You start responding to evidence. Your decisions become based on demonstrated patterns instead of promises or appearances. This kind of awareness gives you confidence and self-reliance. You don't need to hope someone will match their words with actions. You can see it for yourself. And here's the profound part. Once you make observation your default mode, it transforms how you interact with the world. You stop wasting energy decoding endless explanations. You stop trying to reconcile words with actions. You focus on behavior, the reliable, visible evidence of character. This gives you clarity, calm, and a sense of control in situations where most people are guessing, hoping, or misled. Ultimately, observing first and trusting later isn't cynicism. It's self-preservation. It's developing a lens sharp enough to see truth behind performance. It's a skill that protects you from disappointment, strengthens your judgment, and allows you to navigate the world with precision, awareness, and confidence. The moment you make this approach a habit, you gain something rare, an almost instinctive sense of who to trust, when to wait, and when to step back. You stop being caught off guard. You stop investing energy in appearances. You begin living in alignment with reality, where the only thing that truly matters is what people do, not what they say. Observation over declaration. Behavior over words, patterns over promises. That simple shift protects you in ways that charm, eloquence, or persuasive storytelling never could. And once you internalize it, nothing about human behavior catches you by surprise again. Words can be rehearsed, polished, and shaped into whatever someone wants you to believe. But behavior is raw data. It's unedited. It's honest even when the person isn't trying to be. Carl Jung understood this long before modern psychology turned it into a concept. He knew that a person's deeper self reveals itself through repeated actions, not confident declarations. And once you see the difference, you can't go back. Listen to what people say, but don't build your understanding on it. Build it on what they consistently do. Build it on how they show up when things get difficult, inconvenient, or unpredictable. Build it on the moments where the mask slips and the real patterns appear. Because in the end, the truth doesn't announce itself. It shows up in behavior, quietly and consistently. People can describe who they think they are as much as they want, but the real story is always written in their actions. Watch long enough, and you'll see everything you need to know.